We'll have lots of things that we can share tonight. And again, this is things that I've been able to cobble together through about 12 years of professional practice in sustainability. And we're going to share a little bit about sort of the big problem, a little bit about what the university is doing, and a lot about the things that you can all do in your own homes. So that is my mission for today. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. And that's not supposed to be blank. Mm-hmm. So a couple of things that we want to just sort of start as a baseline in terms of what's going on with climate change specifically. We know that this is something that's real. We know that it is man-made. It comes from the burning of fossil fuels. It's something that's already happening now. This isn't something that we're talking about that's going to be like, oh, 2100, the turn of the century. It's now that we're feeling the effects. This is something that can be slowed, but that means that we all have to be involved and we need to act on this now. We've been talking about this as an issue for quite a while. And if we had all acted significantly, say 15 or 20 years ago, it would be a much better situation for us, and we would see less, cataclysmic kinds of changes coming our direction. But again, I'm trying to be focused on the optimistic part and empower all of us to be involved in the solutions of this. We've only begun to feel the effects of climate change right now, and they're going to be becoming more significant as we move forward. But there's lots of things that we can do to minimize those disruptions to our families and to look at how we can be a part of the solutions to this. As a primer, just sort of looking at sort of the backdrop of this, part of the challenge that we have is that there's so many people that we're carrying on the planet. When I came onto this earth, right around 1965, there were about 3.5 billion people here living on Earth. At this point, we have doubled that. I expect and hope to be around for another 35 or 40 years. Likely in that time, it's probably going to be doubling or going up by another additional factor. So again, it begs the question, how much of a carrying capacity does the planet Earth have? How much clean water do we have? How much are we able to have arable land that we can grow food in? And as all of us are living on this planet, we are all emitting greenhouse gases. And so how much is that going to be adding to this collective problem that we're creating? Here's a fun little chart going back historically. If you go back 1,000 years, what I like about this is it sort of combines things. That if you look at the amount of carbon emissions that we as a society have emitted, if we look at the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, and we look at the temperature change. This is, I think, a striking resemblance as you see the amount of emissions going up, the amount of concentrations in the overall atmosphere. We're up over 420 parts per million right now in the atmosphere. People historically, as we've been alive on planet Earth, have not lived above 350 parts per million. We're at 420 at this point. So weather is difficult to predict. How the climate is going to function is difficult to predict because we have no record of this. For a long time, we were able to sort of look historically and say, oh, look, there's some sort of natural fluctuations in temperature. You can see that bearing out in that big, long chart. However, as the CO2 concentrations have gone up, we're now getting into brand new territory. So when people say, oh, well, there's that 100-year flood that we could expect once every 100 years, it's likely that this area might get flooded. No, the bets are off at this point because there's just so much unpredictability built into this system. Again, this last year in the summertime, the American West was on fire. The Arctic was on fire, which is an unusual sort of occurrence to be happening. Our hurricanes are getting more and more intense. We're seeing that happening as it's bearing out everywhere with billions and billions of dollars worth of damages. We have entire ice sheets that are collapsing. This one happens to be just cruising, off of Greenland and heading past a few nice little houses there. We just read recently that there's a whole sea-based iceberg in Antarctica that broke away. Again, that's not adding to the overall amount of water in the ocean, but what it does is it makes vulnerable all of the land ice that's behind it. And again, if we were to lose Greenland and Antarctica, all of the water on that, that's baked into those different glaciers, we're talking 150 to 200 feet level sea rise. So that's a significant change in how things are going. So I think we see some significant risks that are coming there. Germany this last summer was flooding. Again, you're not supposed to walk down the street and see cars piled up on top of one another in these little hamlets. And it wasn't just one river in one location. This was widespread and unprecedented. Here in Westport, you pick a year. If you want to go way back into the hurricanes of '39, if you want to look at East Beach in its recent history, it's taking a beating. It's on the forefront. We are on the forefront of climate change, and we're feeling and experiencing that right here. So that's the gloom and doom part of this. The dinosaurs, if they had had a chance to sort of ask these questions, what could they have done? I think the key would have been adapt more quickly. And that's hopefully one of the lessons that we can kind of take from that. So what are some things that we're doing at the university to make some changes around this? We've pledged to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 100% by 2050. All state agencies are bound by this. We actually made that pledge back in 2007. At that time, it was an 80% reduction we were hoping to do. That has since been revised as we've seen new science that's come out that said, ooh, some of those problems that we thought were this big are actually this big. And our response needs to be more proportional to that. And we have to do a better job with those things. We have created an energy master plan, which basically shows us how we can go and stop burning fossil fuels and be able to both heat and cool the entire university using electricity. We've been employing energy savings projects left and right. I'm in the middle of a 50,000 light bulb LED conversion project. We're about 30,000 light bulbs into that. To be able to track each individual building and to see the work that's going on, it's really a yeoman's work to be able to do that on a large scale. But it's going to make a significant difference in terms of the amount of money that we're spending on our electricity, as well as the amount of greenhouse gases that we are emitting as a result of that. But we're wrapping heating pipes, we're doing all those kinds of good insulation work that we need to be doing. We've been updating our building envelopes where possible, looking at new roofs putting on. Our science and engineering project right now, one of the largest buildings on campus, it's getting a new roof, it's getting new windows, it's getting better insulation. And all of that is happening in the culture of measurement, because we want to make sure that we're aware of where we're starting, what our goal is, and then how we can measure what those changes are as we're being able to make some of those decreases going forward. One of the projects that we had done, and this is about 8 years ago, we went through and instituted about 19 different energy conservation measures. Again, looking at water, looking at wastewater, looking at how we're running our steam, what kind of control systems we had, lighting upgrades at that time, lots of sealing of cracks in windows and doors. And that's kind of the kind of thing that you do every 10 years or so. Because again, you use a door an awful lot of times, and at some point things get worn down and they no longer have the same effectiveness. So just because we did this once doesn't mean that we aren't going to go back and need to refresh that and do those kinds of things again. But again, this was $25 million worth of investment into the campus infrastructure as a way to be able to help reduce our overall impact. Here's some of the highlights as a part of that project. Again, taking lots of cars off the road, because we built our cogeneration plant where we're actually generating steam to be able to heat the campus, and we're using that steam to spin a turbine and generate 1.6 megawatts of our own electricity. So again, that's the 18 million kilowatt hours that we were able to take off of the grid and not have that be responsible for powering us at the campus. But there's lots of things that you guys can do, and this is part of what I wanted to spend my time on today. One of the things you could be doing is attending programs like this. This is going to be fabulous, and I want you to share this with all of your friends once you're done. Thanks to Deborah for being able to record that. The Boston Globe has now got a whole specific section around climate change. I've actually got a bunch of student workers that are working with me, and this is a part of their weekly requirement, that they're reading the Globe and being able to comment on all these different things. We've been joined by a cat today. She loves presentations, so she always joins me for these. But the climate beat that they've got going on, again, they're very serious in looking at this. And again, they started with the same premise that I did at the beginning of this. We're not debating climate change as whether it's real or not. It is, it's happening, it's now, it's us. Like all of those things are baked into the truth. And we're not going to spend time looking at this as a debate, which I think we've done for far too long. I encourage you to talk with friends. I think that these are comfortable conversations that you can have around the campfire or around a kitchen table someplace. about, what are the things that you're concerned about? What are things that you're doing to be able to make a difference? How are you empowered to be a part of that solution? And how is it that we can put sustainability and climate change sort of into our decision-making lens so that every time we're making a decision, we can try to think of something that's going to be less impactful. So again, I think that when you start to consider that, am I going to drive to the end of the road to get my mail today, or am I just going to walk? Or should I take a bike? Or are we going to wait for tomorrow and just do that? And I don't have to go there 6 times a week. I can go down there fewer times. There's lots of documentaries that are out that are covering climate change issues. I was just flipping through PBS the other day, and they had a whole thing on Arctic sinkholes and looking at the amount of methane that's collapsing up in that region. Fascinating stuff, scary stuff, alarming. But again, I think things that we need to be aware of to truly understand the process. And coming off of the last 4 years of our politics in this country, I think one of the things that I would really encourage people is that we really need to trust the scientific method. And again, this is stuff we all learned in 8th grade science class, but it's a tried and true process that's been used to discover what truth is for hundreds and thousands of years. Because again, somebody has a hypothesis and says, I wonder why this happens. And then they do a test, and then they find out what the reason is. And then they go to their friend and say, hey, this is how I did this test. Did you get the same result if you did it? And the other person says, wow, I did the same thing in the same way that you did, and I got the same result. Awesome. Now we found this sort of new truth, which is different than I did something my way and I'm not going to tell anybody about it and just trust me. That's not scientific. That's an opinion. And lots of people have opinions, but what they don't have is a corner on truth. And the scientific method is something that gets us there. So I think that that's a really critical thing to keep in mind as we're learning new information. So some specific strategies that I want to talk about tonight. There's a couple of different things that you all can be doing in your homes, businesses, or in the line of work that you're doing. Solar panels are one of the easiest things that can be done at this point in terms of being able to harvest electricity from the sun. This is a naturally occurring thing. By capturing this, you're not stealing it from anything else. So you're not trying to take something away and lessening somebody else's ability. They're quiet, they're unobtrusive. They can go on top of a roof. This is actually one of the 5 buildings on campus where we've got 269 kilowatts of photo cells up there. You can put them on a roof, you can put them on the ground. These are fixed panels. You can actually get a little fancier and get ones that sort of track and follow the sun. So they're perfectly oriented to have that angle and get the maximum amount of electricity. There's a few more moving parts, a little bit higher cost, but there's also a greater yield from that. So again, there's different ways that this can all be done. This can easily be paired with batteries to be able to then store that electricity. And this is really the best approach right now, because what we're finding is that at certain times of the day, depending on where you are, California, Arizona is good examples, there's so much solar power that is being harvested that they actually can't use it at that time. So what they're trying to find is ways to be able to store that. So whether that's going into a battery, or as they're doing in some locations where they have a pumped hydro situation where there's water at this level, and when they need to generate electricity, they drop it down through a turbine. And when there's not enough, when there's a lot of electricity in the excess one, they run the pumps backwards and they pump the water back up to the top of the hill. Simple battery system where being able to store electricity. That's an amazing sort of cool system. You probably need like 600 feet of altitude difference, and I'm not sure Westport has that kind of topography, but it's a neat concept anyway. Solar systems, there's things that can be leased, they can be owned. If you're leasing it, you're sharing those revenues with somebody else who's upfronted that money. Mass Save is a program in Massachusetts where we've all paid in as ratepayers, and they're willing to provide you with 0% loans. I'll talk about Mass Save in a little bit, but again, it's a great way to be able to get a 0% interest loan from the bank and be able to pay that off with the savings. So instead of paying the electric utilities, you're actually paying the bank that same amount of money. And after 6 years, you own the system, so you can run it for another 19. There are some locations where they're not suited to be able to put panels on a roof. Either the roof is in the wrong direction or there's just too much tree cover. So community solar is a new thing that's come on board, where somebody does have space where they can put a solar field. And what happens is you buy into a portion of that. And so the electrons that they're creating there, you get a credit for to be able to go to your house. So again, by signing a contract with them so that you're an off-taker of that, you're then able to get all of your electricity coming from that solar field. So it's a paper transaction and a contractual relationship, but again, you were able to help them get that built by being the off-taker. So you'd have a contract for a period of time, generally like a 20-year sort of period of time. Just a little picture down on the bottom that, again, if you take a panel and you connect it to a battery, and then that battery is feeding either the house or the grid, that's the best way to sort of match and balance that system so that we can have lots of resiliency, and you're using the electrons that you're creating, but you're also storing them at a certain time so that later on you may need to have those. Wind turbines have a great history here in Massachusetts. Some of the earliest settlers, if you see pictures from back in the old days that have been painted, there were tons and tons of these windmills that were around. This particular one was the one that we had on campus. They generate year-round electricity, and actually they generate more in the winter when there's generally more wind. What's awesome about that is that we generally need more energy in the wintertime to be able to keep us warm. The reliability on these models has really improved over time. There's a variety of models available for home use. And again, that paired with a battery system is an awesome way to be able to help your own resiliency. Geothermal systems is a new sort of a thing kind of here, but in Europe, they've been doing this for decades. And the idea is that you're taking hot water or taking water from your home, and then you're circulating it through the ground, and you're able to pick up either the heat or dissipate the heat, depending on what you're doing, for either the cooling season or the heating season. And again, it's a very efficient system of being able to transfer temperature from the ground, which is always at a constant temperature, into usability within your house. It does run on electricity. So again, if that's coming from the grid or from your solar system or your battery, it would be a great way to be able to be resilient and to have your home be able to remain warm during a storm. There's a little bit of a higher upfront cost for this heating system, but a really, really low operation cost. So again, the payback period is fairly quick with this. And again, systems can be put in either horizontally. So if you've got a lot of land, you can put it sort of in a shallow system, or if you don't have a lot of land, you can go vertical and you can drop those down. The wells that we're looking to be able to put at the university, we're looking at drilling 1,000 of those, and they'll be about 500 feet deep. And that's going to handle about 45% of the amount of heating and cooling that we would need to have at the university. So it's a really awesome system to be able to put in. Heat pumps are, again, a new sort of approach to heating and cooling. I've got these in my house. We were able to put them in. And again, the idea is, unlike a traditional window air conditioner that is rejecting heat from a location, what this does is it has the ability to run frontwards as well as backwards. So in the summertime, it can reject the heat for you. In the wintertime, it can reject the cold for you. So again, you can run it backwards or forwards. The similar way with the geothermal system, you either run it backwards or forwards, depending on where you want the heat to be rejected. The other thing that's really neat about a heat pump is that it dehumidifies, and there's a setting for that. So actually, for most of the summertime, we run our dehumidification system in the house, which takes less energy to run than an actual air conditioning system. It's the same machine, it's just a different sort of setting on it. They also have heat pumps that are available for hot water systems, so you don't have to have either a gas-powered system or an electricity-powered system. It's still electric, but it's a heat pump system. They're larger tanks. They take a little bit longer to recover. But again, if it's a larger tank, you've got more hot water on site, and it's far more efficient. So again, a little bit more of an upfront cost for those, but again, you're able to make that back because the lower operating costs over time with it. Lots of other sustainable practices that you guys could be committing to. The first thing I would really encourage everybody to do is to get a home energy audit through the Mass Save program. They've been doing these for years, for a really long time. And again, it's a simple phone call. You already pay on your utility bills for energy savings measures. And this is one way to get that money back to you. Essentially what happens is they'll make a scheduled appointment with you. During COVID, they're actually doing these over the phone where they ask you a whole set of questionnaires. They'll come out and do something called air sealing, which means they go around the foundation as well as in your rafters and be able to seal up some of the cracks so that there's less air infiltration and exchange with the outside world. They've got a program for insulation itself to be able to add insulation where you don't have any or you need additional amounts. And again, they're looking in attic spaces where it used to be 4 inches and then it was 6 inches and now it's 12 or 18 or 30 inches to be able to provide additional heat protection and keep the cold where you want it and the hot where you want it to be as well. And again, that's a year-round sort of benefit. They're offering 75 to 100% off the cost of that service. Yes, I did say that 75% off if you happen to be either a low income or, as we have lots of children, it adjusts your income and it puts you into a category. We were able to get free insulation of the home. It was about a $15,000 benefit. So again, that in my previous house, I actually just paid to have the whole house done, and it took about 3 years for that to pay itself back, just from the insulation value that comes as a result of that insulation. Mass Save also has the opportunity to participate in programmable thermostats. Again, the ability to sort of set that and make sure that automatically in the background it's adjusting when you're going to be at home or you're not going to be home. You can use it from an app, or you're going away on a trip, you can set that backwards and then restart it on your way back. Really great ways to be able to cut an additional 20–25% off of your heating and cooling bills. The monitor for your electricity, Sense is one company, Square D is the one shown there. They're actually the same unit, they just have a different color end cap on it. But the idea is that this is something that gets installed in your breaker box, and then you've got an app that you're able to look at, and it shows you. Thanks, Kitty, for dropping the keyboard. Wow. So the Sense monitor actually shows you how much electricity you're using at any given time, and specifically what it is that's doing that. So this is a great way if you have teenagers that, I don't know, leave lights on all the time, or may have left the garage door open. It can give you different kinds of alarms for a variety of different settings. But it's a really great way to see sort of what are the energy hogs. It shows you per device what those things are that are running. It'll actually show if there's like a motor stall in an appliance of some sort, like, oh wow, the refrigerator seems to be starting to go on the fritz, so they can help sort of prevent some of those catastrophic failures of, oh my gosh, we didn't know that it was broken. Well, this is a system that actually will show you how to do that. Again, just a reminder, insulating your home, really great opportunity. You do have the opportunity also in Massachusetts, because of a deregulated market, to be able to purchase electricity from renewable sources. I know that in Dartmouth, they have a system where there's a community aggregation that they're a part of, and so they're buying electricity as a bigger sort of bulk purchasing power. And they get a little bit of a better price, but they also have a better price than if you wanted to have not just the regular mix of renewables in there, if you wanted to have 50% renewables or 100% renewables. So there's options within some of those programs. But as a ratepayer, you always have the option to choose whomever it is that you want to. And there's lots of folks on the open market who are selling renewable power to you that in those kind of flavors as well. So 50%, 75%, 100%. And again, just other sustainable practices. Walking and riding bikes are really great ways to be able to rethink, do I really have to take the car? And how can I maybe get someplace in a less impactful way? So again, looking at those sort of inventory of decisions, and this is where I think that sort of sustainability lens kind of becomes helpful as you look to say, I need to go someplace. Well, what vehicle are you currently driving? If you have a choice of vehicles, can you take the less impactful vehicle more often? Or is it just kind of the routine of like, this is the one that I drive, this is the one that my partner drives, and that's just the way it is? Do you have the option to ride share? I'm alarmed at the amount of times that our family, and I'll own this, we're all gonna go out for dinner, but we're gonna leave from this location, we're gonna go to that location. Except one kid wants to then go off to a friend's house, so then there's a second car that gets involved, and then somebody else actually wasn't home, they were coming from their job, so there's a third car involved. So when is it that we can coordinate those kinds of things a little bit better and try to be more intentional about making sure that we're, again, making less impactful decisions? Do we use public transportation here? And if not, can we be lobbying our public regional transport agencies to be able to provide better services that are more in touch with our community needs? Stuff. This is a big one. There's a whole show called The Story of Stuff, which I think is a really great sort of cute little video. It's about 15 minutes long. Just look up The Story of Stuff in Google. But again, is this something that we really need to have in our lives, or do you just want it because it's kind of cool? And again, I realize that when you're above the age of 25, it's easier to have those kinds of conversations. I have teenagers and they're kind of like, want, and I'm always sort of checking them with, is it something that you need? And again, we want to provide things that people need and provide you something that's quality and something that's going to last, as opposed to we're always chasing this version of this season's latest fashion or cut or color. And there's a place for some of that in our lives, but there's also a really strong place for things that last for a long period of time, and that we're going to get full use out of and actually wear something out, as opposed to just like, I bought this at H&M and I'm going to wear it 3 times and then it's going to turn to garbage because it's out of fashion and it doesn't last that long. Recycling, I think, is one of the, it's a bane of my existence working in sustainability because so many people are focused on the recycling piece of it. And are we recycling correctly? And are we making sure that we're getting it into the right bin? And what happens once it goes into the bin? And is it actually being recycled in the system? And I heard that that plastic number 7 doesn't actually go anywhere. Again, if we sort of step back from all of that, back when they first came out with that sort of triangle shape, it was reduce, reuse, and then recycle. We've sort of added repurpose and repair into that sort of philosophy as well. And when is it that we can look at all those other R's before we get to the ultimate, at the end of all of those different choices, then am I able to recycle an item? But did you reduce the amount of stuff that you had in the first place? Have you reused it as something else? Can it come back in your life in some other way, shape, or form and repurpose it into something? Does it just need to have a fix? Is there a simple repair that we can do? And when have we lost some of those skills? I remember my mom, love my mom, but when we had the darning pile, the mending pile, so it's like, oh, I have a hole in my sock. She's like, oh, put it in the mending pile. And then I realized that things never came out of the mending pile because she just never had time to fix the hole in the sock. And at some point we had to replace it. But we've lost some of the art of those things, of just being able to put a simple patch on something or to be able to repair. So again, I think having some of those skills is something we're seeing more and more community members that are doing. We see libraries that are now checking out sewing machines so that you can try before you buy, or you can learn on those kinds of things. So I think some of those skills are really important to bring back. Last thing on this is just the whole idea of collectively getting together. I think this is a great organization as an example that says, we care about our river, we care about our community, and we realize that water connects all of us. So how can we become more active and make sure that we are organizing around issues and policies and actions that we can all participate in? The climate is one of those as well. And there's so many different organizations that are out there, from 350.org to the Sunrise Movement, that are doing really great work. And again, find something that fits your individual politics. But again, working collaboratively with others, I think, is often a way to be able to lift up your voices and see that bigger. Couple of observations. Currently, Westport is not a green community and not registered with the State Department of Energy. But were you to do that, again, and it's a fairly simple process. There's some things that you have to adopt as a community. The Stretch Energy Code is one of those things, but not the only piece. In doing that organization and getting yourselves registered, is that there's actual grant money that comes available through the DOER to be able to do things like put in a high efficient boiler into the municipal buildings. So I know when Dartmouth had done that work, Lakeville had done that work, they were able to upgrade the schools and the town hall and be able to look at energy efficiency things. Again, keeping your tax rates low by spending less money. This is not just good for the environment, it's good for your pocketbooks. And again, if anytime you look at any of these actions that we've just sort of talked about, they're all things that save money. They're also things that save energy, and there's things that save the planet. So again, the Green Community Act is a really great way for Westport to be able to make that step forward in doing that. There's some really great work that's being done by the Coastal Reliance Committee, and the Resilience Committee, excuse me. Again, I think that's a great organization in Westport that is certainly looking for some more help and awareness around some of the challenges that we face here in Westport. We also need to really recognize that there's lots of stories of people who have lived through significant weather events, and make sure that we're capturing those stories. I mean, all of us have been down to the bottom of Westport Point. We've seen, this flood at this time, this flood at this time. But the stories are bigger than that. It's not just that one location. It's all the way up the rivers. It's all the ways that, the water has infiltrated at different times in different ways. But becoming aware of some of those stories and heeding the lessons that come from that. I Forgot to bring it to today, but Deborah, I'll send it over to you. There's a link that I just learned about online where you can actually look at the actual flood risk for your address, which I think is an amazing tool that they've got that level of specificity that they can sort of hone into your property and say, oh, okay, based on historical data, based on climate change that's going to be coming, here's what we think that you need to know. So if you're evaluating purchasing a property, or if you already own that piece of property, it would be really helpful to sort of be mindful of some of those things. Last thing on this as a community, I think we just all need to be very mindful that sea level rise is a reality, that the water as it gets hotter is going to be expanding. That's what water does when it gets hot, it expands. And then as we heat the planet and as we heat the oceans, the water is going to become larger. And by larger, it means it's the level is going to be rising up. As we melt more glaciers, there's more water entering that system. Again, that water is going to be coming up. And we see this with every nor'easter and all sorts of hurricanes that come in. The water backs up from the ocean, the river can't go out, and there's this pushback and the whole thing swells. The other piece is ocean acidification, and there's a lovely little sort of diagram down at the bottom. The food that we eat in this area comes from clams, and it comes from oysters, and it comes from scallops, and all of those are affected by the acidity of the water. And if little baby animals can't form a good shell, then they're not going to live to maturity, they're not going to be able to grow as large, and the amount of seafood that we're able to get to be able to feed ourselves is going to be decreasing. And again, this is all because there's more carbon dioxide in the air. That carbon dioxide is getting stored into the ocean, and that's affecting the acidity of the water. This is something that I think lots of people don't yet know about, and it's something that's pretty significant. Because again, sea level rise is one thing, but the actual composition of the water itself is going to affect what is happening with that ocean life. Most importantly, again, I come back to the whole issue of vote. We need active citizens to be able to participate in their communities because local elections matter. Our state elections matter, our federal elections matter, because who we put into those positions, we have to make sure that they're representing the people as opposed to our corporations. And unfortunately, in our American system currently, with the vote of Citizens United being seen, a corporation has the same vote as a person. So they get the same free speech protection. They can then send their dollars as their vote, as their voice to fund candidates. And that is extremely dangerous because you now see large corporations in the fossil fuel industry who are trying to confuse and misdirect politicians away from the truth and the fact. And again, Exxon has been exposed for their work in trying to deny climate change and to obscure the science and to continue to pump oil for their own profits and to keep the subsidies for those oil companies large because the politicians are the ones who have set those subsidies and haven't changed that yet. So voting becomes a really critical piece of solving the bigger problems that we've got. So in conclusion, what if we do nothing? What if we sort of say, I hear what you're saying, Jamie, but we're fine. We're out in the country. We've got some space here. I'm up on the hill. I'm overlooking the water. It's way down there. I think the reality is, with all these storms that have blown in, as we see the ability to get to that piece of property, it probably at some point goes over a bridge that goes over a piece of water that is potentially going to provide danger to that. The wind that is going to be coming through those storms is probably going to pick out your home on that hill because you're an easier target than if you were tucked away down in some other locations. We're all vulnerable to all of these things. And again, if the trucker blockade in Canada is showing us anything, if 25% of our commerce can't come across a bridge from Canada, it's a long way around the Great Lakes for them to get to someplace else. And again, that's an expensive way to be able to get something there. And you can't just automatically find a flotilla of boats any longer to run them across the Great Lakes to come over this direction. So again, we're all going to be affected by all of those things. Again, I saw a study one time that said if we lose 6 major bridges across the Mississippi, we're not going to have bread on the East Coast. We just don't grow enough wheat here. That's significant. So something that we should be aware of. So what if we're trying to do some things, but we find out that in the end, it just wasn't quite enough? That's my worry, is that we're acting too late. We're not doing things significantly enough. So that's something that drives me and gives me passion to lobby for and to encourage people to make these changes, to realize that putting solar panels on your house is going to pay for itself in about 6 years. And then you've got 19 years at least of free electricity that's going to come after that. If you've got government, if you've got the Mass Save program guaranteeing that loan and providing you with a low interest rate so that that formula can exist, everybody should be doing this because you're already spending the money to the utility companies. So why not spend it to yourself first? As my grandfather had always said, whenever you make $1, make sure you pay yourself first. Give yourself 10 cents and tuck it away. And then the rest of it you can spend on all the things that you want or need. So I like to end sort of with this. The reality is that the Earth is a very old place. It's been around 4.7 billion years, and we're a mere blip in time. We're making a very significant impact on it in that blip in time. And if we get it wrong, and if what some people are predicting to have many of these tipping points where we are beyond a point that we can retreat, if you see the mass extinctions, people are talking about the 5th or the 6th mass extinction of things. The dinosaurs didn't get it right. There's others that haven't. We may be on the precipice of some of that as well. Earth will continue without us no matter how hot it gets. Most likely wood ticks and cockroaches will also be there during that time period. There just won't be humans. So Earth in some cases doesn't care about us. I care about the people and want to make sure that we're going to be here and that we're going to be around. I really do this because of this guy. This is our youngest. He's actually 16 right now, so he doesn't like it when I show this photo very often. But again, it used to be about his life because I'm trying to make changes to impact him. I'm also cognizant of the fact that this is impacting me. So if you are the most selfish person in the world and only concerned about what's in it for you, there's a lot that's in it for you. There's more that's in it for your children and even more for their children as well. So again, if you look at Native American sayings, you're looking 6 generations in the future as to what your decision is going to impact. We're looking at the next 5 minutes. So I think expanding our time horizon sometimes helps us to keep focus on the fact that we really need to be mindful of what the cumulative effect is of all of our decisions as they're going forward. I'm going to stop there. I threw a lot of stuff out at you, and hopefully it's sparked something in you, hopefully some sort of action and information piece that you can take forward. But Deborah, we're happy to open this up for questions to see what.
Yeah, we actually didn't get any questions in the chat, which kind of surprised me. But I did want to make folks aware that if you're interested in sustainable architecture, there's a family in Westport that has built a house that is completely off the grid, and it uses a lot of European technologies that I had never seen before. Including, water saving systems, all kinds of stuff besides the things that Jamie has described. And this is a family that would be very interested in showing folks their building. They've built it themselves. And if you're interested, just email me, director at WRWA, and we could take a little tour over there. But it was fascinating. I learned a lot. And they also are running a farm system in which they're doing what they call farm incubation. So they're not farming themselves, but they're leasing out their land to other folks so that they can learn about farming, which I thought was really interesting. Let's see, any other questions or thoughts, comments? I just want on our little part, that's Roberta saying thank you for letting us learn about what UMass is doing to support your efforts and the sustainability efforts. We do also, as an organization, try to make our efforts. And if you want to come and tour our building, we'd love to have you come and visit. We have solar panels on the not on the roof, but on the addition to the building. We have lots of energy saving systems that we put in place. And we also have pollinator gardens in the front and the back of our building, which replaced some pretty unappealing grass. And so we're trying to get people to think about that as well. We've got some folks. we've got somebody saying mass saves needs to be promoted to more homeowners. That's true. They'll come in and do an incredible audit of your house. I did that when we first moved here. It's well worth it. And, you know, if nothing else, they'll give you LED light bulbs and you can, that's the minimum, but they've got a lot of other things, and they really will give you a lot of suggestions.
And the low flow shower heads that they're able to give out sometimes, aerators for your faucets. The light bulbs has been a popular part of the program. It changes and evolves every year. Sometimes there's an outlet strip or some other kinds of energy saving kinds of things that they've got. But I think the bigger things are sort of looking at the whole house systems. You know, how old is your heating system? How can we get you into this new ductless mini split electrification kind of a piece? They're finally providing better incentives for that. I think we're stopping the incentives for some of the fossil fuel based pieces.
Yeah, and the other thing that Jamie and I talked about yesterday is that Westport as a town is doing some interesting things. Right now, the Board of Health has about a year ago passed a regulation that new construction has to use denitrifying septic systems. And this is a big problem for our community because all of our toilets, even if they're Title V compliant systems, unless they are denitrifying systems, they are all adding to the nitrogen that eventually flows into the river. And it doesn't matter if you're right on the river, it all goes into the, you know, into the groundwater and ends up there. So that's definitely, there also are low interest loans for people who want to upgrade their systems. So there's some work being done on that level too. And, you know, we welcome you to join us. We do some very low level things. We have twice a year an electronics recycling day with Indie Cycle, which is a company from Rhode Island. And they can take all of our old computers, et cetera, and strip them and recycle them. So instead of them going into landfills, your old TVs, and that's one of the things that we've started to do, and we're doing twice a year, and encourage you to do that. Let's see if we've got anybody else who has a comment in the chat.
Yeah, Jim had asked a question about, is it possible to have a solar system that then runs the heat pump system? And so the answer is yes. I've actually done that here at my house, where we've got solar panels and it's sized, you know, again, part of it's based on how much roof space, how many trees you have around you, how big is the house. So there's lots of complications to that, but the concept is yes. Again, through electricity, you're able to store that and use that. Again, most solar systems are grid tied systems. So again, if you're creating additional electricity that you're not using at the moment, it's just feeding into the grid. And then for those times when you need that to come back, it's provided as a credit. So again, the solar installers do a really good job of sort of sizing your system based on what your needs are. And then if you're like, you know, thinking I'll maybe switch over to a heat pump for my water heater, and maybe I'll have an electric car someday, we'll have an electric oven. So again, I've done all those things, and we had to scale and scope that for anticipating that.
And then I recently learned that, you know, you also have to anticipate power outages with you know, climate change.
Yeah.
And so the battery, like you can have in-house battery backup for those sorts of things, so you don't have to somehow have a propane system.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, the battery system, there's lots of programs that are out there right now for demand response, where actually the utility will pay you to have the battery system. So it'll help defray the costs of that.
And so how do we find out about the different companies and stuff that do these kinds of assessments and planning work?
Again, you know, a quick Google search, if you look at, you know, solar systems near me, will generally bring up a whole list of installers.
Yeah.
And Mass Save would do that too?
Yeah.
They would have recommendations. Mass Save would have recommendations for these sorts of things as well.
Yeah. There are some really innovative solar systems that you won't see around much that are actually, they look like flowers and they move with the sun. So they are they're ground mounted, which is something that people sometimes want and sometimes don't want, but they will capture a lot more percentage of sun because they're mobile. And one other thing for you to think about in looking at solar is to ask questions about what is the long life of the panels, what is the disposal of the panels when they're no longer functioning, and you know, where were they made and what kind of conditions were they made in, because like a lot of the throwaway clothing, a lot of these things are made in these really pretty terrible environments. So it's certainly worth spending some time doing research before you just sign on with somebody.
Well, or if someone else has done that research, this is one of those things where there's so many questions like this to try to address.
Right, right. Well,
Are there people who are like, I've done this part, you should pay attention to this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to put you in touch with this sustainable architect guy, because he has done a huge amount of research, and I think he's quite eager. He's the president of an Sustainable Architectural Society, and I think he's quite eager to share his knowledge and information. So if you email me, I can link you over email to him.
Great.
Any other questions or comments? Jamie, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. It's really good to think about, you know, the large picture, but also to bring things down to just the day-to-day, and, you know, us being a little bit more mindful of how we conduct ourselves. You know, this is a community that I moved here myself from an urban environment in which I was able to use public transportation and bicycling everywhere and all. So I'm still trying to adjust to, you know, life in the country. But if we do think about, you know, our own lives, I think it helps us to just pay more attention, you know, to what we're doing, what we're buying, how much we're buying, what we need, what we don't need. So thank you all. And any other questions or comments?
Hi, Jamie. That was a great talk. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would also second, I've gotten my house insulated and updated the heating and hot water system with help from Mass Save, and that's been really great. And we actually heard about the program from our real estate agent when we purchased our home. So I don't know who needs to hear it, but I think, you know, if real estate agents, you know, could be recommending that, that would be great, because when you first move in, that's when you want to be doing that stuff. Yeah. It was really convenient. Anyways, Jamie, I'm also a student at UMass, and I didn't know if you could speak to the no-mow zones that I've seen on campus. Like, what's going on with that? What kind of data are you collecting, and like what might be the future of that if that's successful? And I also had another question. If you could speak to the sustainability involved in dining services. I'm kind of wondering what's the status on composting or growing food on campus, or even promoting, you know, plant-based meals, things like that. Anything you can share? I'm just interested in those things. Thanks.
Awesome, great. So the LOMO, for those of you who may not have been to the UMass campus, we have several different test patches around campus. There were 5 of them initially that we were working with the biology department to be able to provide both a test and a control location, so that students from the ecology programs could go out and actually look at a variety of different things that they were studying. So they looked at things like soil moisture, they looked at the plant species, they looked at insect species, they looked at animal activity in the spaces that were being mowed, and then those in the no-mow area. So again, the no-mow areas basically means we go through and we cut it one time a year to keep the trees from being able to grow up, but otherwise we're kind of going for like a prairie grass kind of a space. And what we found through some of the initial research that was done by undergraduates was that the low-mow area had more moisture in the soil itself, so it holds on to the moisture better. The root systems are deeper. There's more variety of species of plants that are there, that there's more variety of the good kinds of insects and not the flying annoying insects to humans. And that there, because of the amount of shade and cover, tends to be more animal activity. So we saw deer that were coming out and bedding down or hanging out, lots more squirrels and birds and other things that were hanging out for longer periods of time on the ground. So that it was a pilot project that we were initially doing. We're morphing that and changing it from those 5 different locations into an interior quad space where we have a little bit more control over that. Again, we fight with the perception of people saying, oh, look, UMass isn't mowing their grass.
Mhm.
And again, we have signage that's up right when you're close, but if you're driving past that, you don't necessarily get to interact with that and learn more about it. So we're going to put those in a space where it's easier to slow down and buy it and read that information. So that can be more of an educational opportunity. So that's kind of the direction that that's been going in. As far as dining services are concerned, we've got a really great partner with Chartwell's Dining Services. They are our provider of food service. They're actually growing vegetables right on campus. We've got a leafy green machine. It's a shipping container size that basically it's an interior hydroponic garden, vertical grown with LED lights. It uses 85% less water. There's no pesticides. There's no bugs. So literally they take a box of lettuce and walk it across the parking lot to the kitchen, and then they serve fresh daily things that are grown right there on campus. It's about 25% of the amount of lettuce that we eat at the university, but we can also grow flowers and all kinds of other things in there. So that's been a hugely successful fresh program that we're able to do. They're also have been doing a really great job of, again, trying to make sure that there's both vegetarian and vegan options available at every meal, that they're looking at local produce and that they're infusing that into their food. We just did a whole research project around local bycatch and locally abundant fish and making those available to students and helping them learn that monkfish, while ugly, is delicious and goes really well in the following kinds of dishes. Or redfish is something that you may not have thought of buying, but it acts just like a cod. It's a flaky white fish and it's $5 less a pound. So again, making those kinds of things more readily available for people. So again, they've been really great partners with us on the food waste side of things. We've tried pilot projects looking at client-facing things. So out in a dining hall, are we able to have compost that's collected there? The challenge, of course, is that for all of the do-gooders that do the right thing and scrape their plates and put their napkins in there, one person drops a soda container or a straw in there, and since our food then ends up going to a pig farm, we don't want to feed non-food to animals. We don't have a commercial operation around us that does windrows that we could just have things sort of naturally decompose into compost. So we're using our food waste to feed animals, again, which is higher on the EPA's food chart of desirable things to do. So it's difficult to do that on the sort of public facing sides. So behind the scenes, what we've been doing is capturing both our pre-consumer waste as well as our post-consumer waste. Pre-consumer waste would be like the tops off of tomatoes and pineapples. Those things go really well for chicken feed. So we've been trying to work with local farmers to be able to hook them up and provide them with that. So again, we're feeding animals with food. And then capturing all of the food plate scrapings behind the scenes from things that come through our dining hall and able to get those pulped down and then moved off to a pig farm that way. Again, guaranteeing that we've got quality product that we're sending them that's safe for them. And again, that's not going into a landfill. So lots of behind the scenes stuff that people aren't aware of. And again, things that all of you can be doing at home as well. I didn't talk much about that, but again, we all have the opportunity to take our own plate scrapings, put it into a container outside and, keep adding to it. And by the end of next season, you've got stuff that's going to be able to go out on your plants and be able to help nourish those.
Very cool. Thank you.
Hooray for composting. We just got that comment. I just wanted to also say thanks again to Jamie for this great presentation, and a little bit of a plug for Renee, who's going to be speaking to us later in March, on March 3rd, about Asian shore crabs. So thank you all for participating tonight. And please do look at our website. Contact me if you'd like, the westportwatershed.org. We have lots of videos on our website that we've been making during COVID that are all topic specific, and many of them are geared for use in classrooms with children. But we also have, a drone tour of the video of the watershed that is really beautiful. And please, connect with us online or come and visit. We are welcoming visitors in our center, and it's a beautiful new facility. So we'd love for you to be there. So we'll say goodnight and thank you all for being here tonight. I'm sorry we didn't have as many people as had signed up, but it was a really great talk, and we will make it available on our website too.
Perfect. Thanks for your time. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, thank you.